Law and Ethics, exploring ethics and professional ethical behaviors. Ethical considerations in athletic training are crucial to ensuring the well being and fair treatment of all patients. Athletic trainers have a responsibility to uphold ethical principles and protect the health and the safety of the individuals they work with. Here are some key ethical considerations in athletic training that we will begin to explore. 1. Confidentiality. Athletic trainers must respect the privacy of the patients and maintain the confidentiality of all of their medical records and information. Athletic trainers should only share information with other healthcare professionals or relevant individuals on a need to know basis, with the patient's consent and in compliance with legal and ethical guidelines, which we will explore. Number 2, gaining informed consent. Patients and athletes have the right to be informed about the risks, benefits, and potential outcomes of any medical treatment or intervention. Athletic trainers should obtain informed consent from athletes or patients, or their legal guardians if they're a minor, before providing care. This ensures that the patient understands the nature of the treatment or any associated risks with said treatment. Number 3, professional competence. Athletic trainers should maintain a high level of professional competence by staying updated with current research, best practices, and advancements in the field. They should also strive for ongoing professional development to provide the best possible care to patients or athletes. 4. A conflict of interest. Athletic trainers should try to avoid conflicts of interest that could compromise their professional judgment or the welfare of their patients or athletes. This may include disclosing any financial or personal relationship that may influence their decision making process or may lead to a bias in the selected treatments. This can also include the relationship between our supervisors as athletic trainers. Number 5, non discrimination. Athletic trainers should provide equal care and opportunities for all patients or athletes, irrespective of their race, gender, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, or any other personal characteristics. Athletic trainers should ensure fairness and non discrimination in their interactions and decision making processes. 6. Emergency care. Athletic trainers must be prepared to provide immediate and appropriate emergency care in the case of sudden injuries or medical emergencies. Athletic trainers should be trained in CPR, first aid, and have access to the necessary emergency equipment. Number 7, boundaries and professional relationships. Athletic trainers should maintain appropriate professional boundaries with their athletes and patients. Athletic trainers should avoid any form of exploitation, harassment, or inappropriate relationships that could harm the athlete or patient or compromise the athletic trainer's role as a professional. Number 8, ethical research. If involved in research activities, athletic trainers should follow ethical guidelines for human subjects research. This includes obtaining informed consent, ensuring participant confidentiality, minimizing risks, and conducting studies with proper ethical oversight. Number 9, collegiality and teamwork. Athletic trainers should work collaboratively with other healthcare professionals and support staff to provide comprehensive care to athletes and patients. They should maintain respectful and professional relationships with all members of the sports medicine team. And finally, number 10, reporting ethical violations. Athletic trainers have a responsibility to report any unethical violation or misconduct they observe or become aware of within their profession. This helps to maintain professional standards and protects the well being of patients or athletes. It is important for athletic trainers to familiarize themselves with professional codes of ethics established by relevant organizations, such as the National Athletic Trainers Association, or NATA, and adhere to any additional guidelines or regulations set by their specific jurisdiction or state. Here are some examples of professional misconduct that commonly occur in the healthcare setting. These behaviors are concerning as they often negatively affect the profession and our patient population. These ethical concerns include lack of integrity, conflicts of interest, informed consent, dual loyalties, social media misuses, self interest concerns, lack of confidentiality, publication fabrication, falsification, bullying, harassment, substance abuse, false documentation, and medical malpractice. The foundations of athletic training clinical decision making is a concept that pertains to the field of athletic training, which focuses on the prevention, assessment, treatment, and rehabilitation of injuries sustained by athletes and other patients. Clinical decision making in athletic training involves the process of evaluating an athlete's condition, identifying the appropriate course of action for care, and implementing the necessary interventions. Clinical decision making focuses on the clinician's clinical skills, many of which you will learn throughout your educational curriculum. Practicing with evidence based care, which involves the best available evidence and appropriate standards of care, including best practices, the patient's preferences and values, and then practicing with ethical standards. The National Athletic Trainers Association Code of Ethics states that the principles of ethical behavior that should be followed in the practice of athletic training. It is intended to establish and maintain high standards and professionalism for the athletic training profession. The principles do not cover every situation encountered by the practicing athletic trainer, but they are representative of the spirit with which athletic trainers should make decisions. Ethical and professional responsibility. Being a professional is not a right, it is a privilege. Professional conduct should be motivated by specific cognitive, technical, and ethical competence. Professionalism is multidimensional, and many healthcare professionals have described it in many ways, including characteristics, responsibilities, behaviors, and values. Professionalism is the basis for medicine's contract with society. This puts the needs of the patient at the forefront of the care. Professionalism helps to develop trust among patients and the clinician, which is vital to the functioning of the healthcare model. Several important constructs sprout from the roots of medical professionalism and also speak to other healthcare professions. These include professional values in medicine, such as altruism and professional responsibility, professionally led regulation, such as self regulation, trust and integrity, and a social contract. Ethics and professionalism appear to be synonymous. However, ethics has an inward orientation, and professionalism has more of an outward presentation. It is important for athletic trainers to be able to make informed ethical choices, to have a deep knowledge of professional code of ethics, the ability to evaluate the ethical dimensions of professional practice, and to demonstrate ethical behaviors on a regular basis. According to research, here are some of the ethical cornerstones for many people. These all apply to healthcare as well as many other professions. Many of these traits may be important to you in your personal life as well. So, why are ethics important? Ethics deepen our reflection on the ultimate questions in life. They help us to think better about morality and the choices we make. Ethics also sharpen our general thinking and our ability to reason and defend. Ethics are important in athletic training for several reasons. 1. Athlete welfare. The primary goal of the athletic trainer is to ensure the health, safety, and well-being of athletes or patient populations. Ethical considerations help protect athletes or patients from harm by promoting appropriate care, preventing unethical practices, and maintaining the highest standards of professional conduct. Number 2, trust and confidentiality. Athletes or patients must be able to trust their athletic trainers to provide them with competent and confidential care. Upholding ethical principles such as maintaining confidentiality and respecting privacy fosters trust between athletes or patients and the athletic trainer, enabling open communication and highly effective treatment. Number three, informed decision making. Ethical considerations ensure that athletes or patients have the necessary information to make informed decisions about their health care. By providing our patients with accurate information, explaining the risks and benefits, and obtaining informed consent, ethical practices empower patients to actively participate in their own care. Number four, fairness and equity. Ethical principles promote fairness and equity in athletic training. By treating all patients equally and avoiding discrimination, athletic trainers can ensure that patients receive fair access to care and opportunities, regardless of their background, identity, or ability. Number five, professional integrity. Upholding ethical standards is fundamental to maintaining professional integrity in athletic training. Ethical behavior demonstrates professionalism, competence, and a commitment to the welfare of patients. It helps establish the credibility of the athletic training profession as a whole. Number six, legal compliance. Many ethical principles align with legal requirements and regulations. Adhering to ethical standards can help athletic trainers comply with relevant laws, such as those related to patient privacy, also known as HIPAA in the United States, obtaining informed consent, and practicing with professional conduct. Number seven, reputation and public perception. Unethical behavior by athletic trainers can damage the reputation of both individual practitioners and the profession as a whole. Adhering to ethical principles helps to maintain a positive public perception of athletic trainers and highlights their dedication to ethical and responsible practice. Number eight, accountability and professionalism. Ethical considerations foster accountability among athletic trainers. By adhering to ethical guidelines, athletic trainers take responsibility for their actions and decisions. Ethical behaviors also contribute to the professionalism of the field, emphasizing the importance of ongoing education, self regulation, and continuous improvement. Overall, ethics play a vital role in athletic training by prioritizing athlete or patient welfare, promoting trust and transparency, ensuring fairness, maintaining professional integrity, and upholding legal and ethical standards. By adhering to ethical principles, athletic trainers can provide the highest quality of care and contribute to the overall development and success of athletes or patients in our care. Ethics are about choices. Although this may sound odd, the purpose of ethics is not to make people ethical. It is to help people make better decisions. Decisions about right and wrong permeate our everyday life. Ethics should concern all levels of life, acting properly as individuals, creating responsible organizations and governments, and making our society as a whole more ethical. Making decisions about right and wrong can be difficult and may be related to individual context. It may be helpful to identify what ethics is not. Ethics is not the same as feelings. Feelings do provide important information for our ethical choices. However, while some people have highly developed habits that make them feel bad when they do something wrong, others feel good even though they are doing something wrong. And often our feelings will tell us that it is uncomfortable to do the right thing if it is difficult. Ethics is not the same as religion. Many people are not religious but act ethically, and some religious people act unethically. Religious traditions can, however, develop and advocate for high ethical standards, such as the Golden Rule. Ethics is not the same as following the law. A good system of law does incorporate many ethical standards, but the law can deviate from what is ethical. The law can become ethically corrupt, a function of power alone, and designed to serve the interests of narrow groups. Laws may also have a difficult time designing or enforcing standards in some important areas, and may also be slow to address new problems. Ethics is not the same as following culturally accepted norms. Cultures can include both ethical and unethical customs, expectations, and behaviors. While assessing norms, it is important to recognize how one's ethical views can be limited by one's own cultural perspective or background, alongside being culturally sensitive to others. Ethics is not science. Social and natural science can both provide important data to help us make better and more informed ethical choices. But science alone does not tell us what we ought to do. Some things may be scientifically or technologically possible and yet unethical to develop or deploy. Right versus wrong. Though morality uses the categories of right and wrong, those two terms are not enough to capture all that we want to say about different types of behavior. While we may say that an action is morally wrong, it means that we ought not to do it. To claim that an action is morally right fails to clarify whether or not we should do it, or are we merely allowed to do it? That is, whether it is obligatory or merely permissible. And what of the acts that go above or beyond the call of duty? They may be morally right, but perhaps we need a term to separate them from other acts that are right in the sense of merely permissible. Expanding the category of morally right may include three different subcategories to better capture the distinctions we want. Morally wrong may be a category on its own. Morally right, we may be morally neutral, morally obligatory, or morally supererogatory. Morally wrong acts are activities such as murder, theft, rape, lying, and breaking promises. Other descriptions may be for things that are morally prohibited, morally impermissible, or acts that one ought not to do, and acts that one has the duty to refrain from doing. Morally right acts are activities that are allowed. These include morally neutral, morally obligatory, and the morally supererogatory. Morally neutral acts are morally right activities that are allowed but are not required. One is neither obligated nor prohibited from doing them. One could also call these acts merely morally permissible acts. Examples of such acts include watching the evening news on television, eating an apple instead of an orange, choosing vanilla over chocolate, whistling while you work, thoroughly chewing your food before swallowing, brushing before flossing instead of after, and other acts. Morally obligatory acts are morally right acts that one ought to do. One is morally prohibited from not doing them. They are moral duties. They are acts that are required. Such acts may be keeping one's promises and providing guidance and support for one's children. Morally supererogatory acts are those that are morally right activities that are especially praiseworthy and even heroic. They go beyond what duty requires. They are not required morally, but if they are done, it is an especially good thing. Examples include generous support for worthwhile charities, volunteer work for local nursing homes, and risking one's own life to save somebody from a burning building. These four categories of acts are not always explicitly distinguished by people, but they seem implicitly incorporated into our moral distinction and decisions. There is, however, some disagreement about what exact types of acts fit into each category. Thus, for example, while everyone thinks murder to be morally wrong, there is controversy about whether or not abortion may be wrong. Some people believe abortion to be wrong, while others believe it to be morally permissible. Normative ethics. Normative ethics promotes or argues for the correct standard of morality. This is a theory of ethics that are concerned with the norms and the standards or criteria that define the principles of ethical behavior. Normative ethics typically focuses on the good versus the bad. Another factor for normative ethics is how one ought to conduct themselves in various situations. There are different types of normative ethics, including virtue ethics, which places emphasis on character and value of the individual, deontology, which places emphasis on the importance of following moral rules, and consequentialism, which emphasizes the importance of consequences of the action. Deontology is an ethical theory that uses rules to distinguish right from wrong. Deontology is often associated with the philosopher Immanuel Kant. Kant believed that ethical actions follow universal moral laws, such as don't lie, don't steal, and don't cheat. Deontology is simple to apply. It just requires that people follow the rules and do their duty. This approach tends to fit well with our natural intuition about what is or is not ethical. Unlike consequentialism, which judges actions by their results, deontology does not require weighing the costs and the benefits of a situation. This avoids subjectivity and uncertainty because you only have to follow a set of rules. Despite its strengths, rigidly following deontology can produce results that many people find unacceptable. For example, suppose you're a software engineer and you learn that a nuclear missile is about to launch that might start a war. You can hack the network and cancel the launch, but it is against your professional code of ethics to break into any software system without permission, and it is a form of lying and cheating. Deontology advises not to violate this rule. However, in letting the missile launch, thousands of people may die. So in this scenario, following the rules makes deontology easy to apply, but it also means disregarding the possible consequences of our actions when determining what is right and what is wrong. Utilitarian ethics. Utilitarianism is an ethical theory that determines right from wrong by focusing on outcomes. It is a form of consequentialism. Utilitarianism holds that the most ethical choice is the one that will produce the greatest good for the greatest number of individuals. It is the only moral framework that can be used to justify military force or war. It is also the most common approach to moral reasoning used in businesses because of the way in which it accounts for costs and benefits. However, because we cannot predict the future, it is difficult to know with certainty whether the consequences of our action will be good or bad. This is one of the limitations of utilitarianism. Utilitarianism also has trouble accounting for the values such as justice and individual rights. For example, assume a hospital has 4 people whose lives depend upon receiving an organ transplant: a heart, lungs, a kidney, and a liver. If a healthy person wanders into the hospital, that healthy person's organs could be harvested to save 4 lives at the expense of 1 life. This would arguably produce the greatest good for the greatest number, but few would consider it as an acceptable course of action, let alone the most ethical one. So although utilitarianism is arguably the most reason-based approach to determining right and wrong, it has obvious limitations. The divine command theory. The divine command theory is the view that morality is somehow dependent upon God or a deity, and that moral obligation consists in obedience to God's commands. The divine command theory includes the claim that morality is ultimately based on the commands or character of God, and that the morally right action is the one that God commands or requires. The specific content of these divine commands varies according to the particular religion and the particular views of that individual divine command theorist. But all versions of the theory hold in common the claim that morality and moral obligations ultimately depend upon God. Divine command theory has been and continues to be highly controversial. It has been criticized by numerous philosophers, including Plato, Kai Nielsen, and J.L. Mackie. The theory also has many defenders, both classic and contemporary. The question of possible connections between religion and ethics is of interest to moral philosophers as well as philosophers of religion, but it also leads us to consider the role of religion in society as well as the nature of moral deliberation. Given this, the arguments offered for and against the divine command theory have both theoretical and practical importance. Other ethical theories. The Allied ethics theory is a theory of ethics that's concerned with the application of normative ethics to particular ethical standards. The virtue ethics theory states that if you are a good person, then you will naturally do good things. In other words, to be good, you must do good. And finally, the ethics of care. This revolves around the issue of compassion and may include caring for those that cannot care for themselves. Historically, this has also been known as a feminist ethics. This is also known as the notion of nature versus nurture. So why might ethics be difficult to understand? Is acting ethically difficult? Is knowing right and wrong difficult? Some things may seem good for us, but are actually not. Good is often mixed with bad. It is rarely a dichotomous situation where we have good versus evil, or bad. And finally, figuring out what is good and bad may be distorted by personal, social, and psychological biases. So how can we make studying ethics a little bit easier? First, we can start by knowing our core values. Do our core values fit the mission of the place that we choose to work and the people with whom we surround ourselves with? In this, we must be clear about our own personal values. It is important that we understand the professional values in the setting we are working in and consider whether your actions reflect your values. Self-awareness. Sometimes we do not give much attention to the things that we do. Reflection prompts us to pause and give serious thought about an issue. We're going to participate in an activity of reflection. Before we reflect, we will have a self-awareness, right or wrong activity. For each of these questions, please circle the number that best reflects your action over time. And then respond to the question, is your behavior morally right or wrong, by circling the appropriate word. After you complete this right or wrong activity, you will use it to complete a reflection. This assignment will be part of your Unit 1 assignments. Once we have completed that assignment, we will reflect on our answers. Do you gravitate towards a particular value orientation? For those questions that solicit a 1 or 2 response, what value subset motivated your behaviors, such as benevolence, self-direction, achievement, universalism, security, conformity, hedonism, spirituality, stimulation, tradition, or power? For those questions that solicit a 3, 4, or 5 response, what value subset motivated your behavior? Benevolence, self-direction, achievement, universalism, security, conformity, hedonism, spirituality, stimulation, tradition, or power. You do not have to respond to these ethical dilemmas, but there's something to think about. In each of these scenarios, I want you to think about how you would respond. We have 2 scenarios on this slide. In the first scenario, a patient with a concussion is the starting shortstop for a baseball team. The concussion is mild, yet still causing a considerable headache. A major game is pending, and the parents are pushing to allow the patient to play. The patient's neighbor is a cardiologist, and the cardiologist says that he will sign off on the athlete for him to play. Is it ethical for this physician to clear this patient? I would like you to also consider if there's anything about this situation that makes it unethical. The second situation, a patient needs a bone scan for a suspected femoral stress fracture. She is unable to return to play until she receives clearance, which will be based on the scan results. You receive a referral from the team physician and have set up the appointment and transportation for your patient. On the morning of the scan, the patient calls you to cancel the appointment 30 minutes before you're scheduled to leave. You reschedule the appointment for the following day, and this time the patient fails to show up. When you see her in the afternoon, she laughs and says she must have forgotten and asks you to reschedule the appointment time 1 week away. You typically try to see if the bone scan staff can squeeze you in any sooner for this athlete, but because of their behavior, you do not ask for a favor this time. Is this ethical? Is there anything about this situation that makes it unethical? Here are some references for our lecture.